Hello and welcome to our brand new weekly show, Imperial Cantina. I am your host, Braydon Leadbetter.
And I'm your co-host, Jackson Daleen.
And this is our weekly show where we sit down, have some drinks with a guest, and talk about Star Wars one movie at a time. And this week we have a very special guest. He is a Star Wars fan and actor in his own right, Addison Brown. Addison, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys for having me. It's a lot of fun to get together with some other Star Wars fans and talk Star Wars.
Yeah, of course. And I know we've had our fair share of having Star Wars conversations, so I'm happy that we're able to do it with a microphone in front of our faces.
Yeah, get it recorded.
Yeah. So we'll start with you, Addison. What have you been up to Star Wars wise recently? What have you been watching, reading, playing?
Yeah, so I have been finished The Mandalorian a little while back. Really enjoyed the end of that. Looking forward to what's coming out in the future Star Wars wise. We're in a little bit of a lull between at least our like Disney Plus shows and movies. So very excited for the future of that.
Yeah, Disney Plus is in Marvel mode right now.
Yeah, they're really grinding out the Marvel right now, which is another podcast entirely. So we'll leave that over there.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed rewatching the first season of The Mandalorian before going into the second season, and I picked up the Star Wars Lego Razor Crest ship and built that while I was rewatching the first season. So it was a whole immersive experience.
Awesome.
And then did you tear it down as you got to the second season?
I cried. I was like, no, there's no coming back from that. Why would you do that?
There's not going to be any more Legos produced of this ship.
I know. I'm so sad. I enjoyed that ship. I thought it was very cool. I'm very sad. But the Slave one was awesome to see again. Yeah. Boba Fett was awesome to come back in. Really cool to get to see him in like more dug into his character instead of just being kind of like a side character. Yeah,
for those of you who don't know, Addison is a very big Lego guy, especially emphasis on Star Wars, but he works the Lego store and he gets in on all the Lego goodies.
Actually, that is very, very true. My introduction probably to Star Wars was through Star Wars Lego sets.
Oh, that's cool. I was just about to ask you, what was your introduction to Star Wars?
Oh, were you? Well, it's perfect. I jumped the gun a little bit. I'm sorry. I shot first there. Well, pun intended.
My clunky.
My clunky.
But yeah, so I mean, the first Star Wars Lego sets came out in the mid to late 90s, and I was born in 1990, so I was about probably 6 to 9, right when I was getting to the age that I started to play with Lego sets. And my parents started buying me Star Wars Lego sets, and those were kind of the main things. We got into other themes, but I remember having the very first Luke's X-Wing Star Wars Lego set, the very first Snow Speeder set that they came out with, and Star Wars Lego has always been just a way for me to play and imagine and create within the world of Star Wars, and really kind of got me into the characters and the places and the ships and the vehicles from a young age. And the answer to that question, what is my introduction to Star Wars, is twofold, actually. There's another story that my dad would like to tell. When I was probably about the same age, growing up, and even to this day, I have always had an issue where I get very, very, very invested in movies, and sometimes too much so, and have very strong and visceral reactions to different things, the way certain characters act.
Yeah. I connect with that completely.
Yeah. Like if there's like bullying on screen, I've narrowed it down now as I've gotten to know myself better, but I would have a really hard time as like a kid with that. So my dad, knowing that, he thought I was probably a little too young to watch Star Wars. Maybe it was still a little bit too scary kind of for like a younger kid who's just starting to watch movies and stuff. But he found a making of Star Wars video from the library, and he thought to himself, this is a great idea. I'm going to put this on. They're gonna. I think Mason, my brother, was born at the same time too, or at that time, and so we were watching together. He was like, they're gonna know the Star Wars characters. They're going to like understand like the places a little bit and the story, and then like when they talk to their friends, they're going to have seen Star Wars, but it's not going to be scary because they're talking about the making of it. And we get through the whole thing, almost the whole thing, and it's going great. Dad's patting himself on the back. He's like, I'm such a good dad. I outsmarted the system. And at the very end, they show the scene of Luke looking through his binoculars and then coming down, and the Tusken Raider is right over him going, and I jump up and I turn to my dad and I say, Dad, you know I shouldn't be watching this.
That's hysterical.
So you're like gatekeeping yourself
popcorn over everybody.
I was gatekeeping myself. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Talking about like my reactions to movies, I also remember the first time I saw A New Hope when Vader comes through Leia's ship after the stormtroopers. I got up and yelled at the screen. I was so mad at them. Like that's like when I was a kid, I just was so into. I was living the movie with everyone else. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Star Wars is like, it just is so responsible for giving people these emotional reactions. And that's awesome that even at such a young age that like it's able to speak to you like that. But
it's been a big part of my life.
Yeah. This is kind of something we like to ask all of our guests at the beginning of the show. But what do you think is your favorite Star Wars character?
Oh, that's such a good question and so hard to answer. There are so many great characters. I mean, that's one of the things that makes Star Wars what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I think I've been giving this question a lot of thought because there's so many characters that I connect with in different ways. But I think that Obi-Wan Kenobi is probably my favorite Star Wars character. He just comes up. He's so much fun to watch on screen. He's got the wit, he's got the sarcasm, he's funny, but he also cares deeply, and is so cool to watch his character arc come through like all the movies, and then also watching like Clone Wars and seeing him dig into his own wrestle with like the Jedi Order and stuff like that too. Honorable mentions are Boba Fett. I always thought he was super cool growing up. Mandalorians have always been something I thought they're so cool. And then Darth Maul would be another honorable mention too, who I thought he was super cool growing up, and then getting more of his story as we've seen it like unveil throughout more Star Wars projects has been really cool too. But I'm going to turn that back around on you guys. What are your favorite Star Wars characters? If you made me answer this question.
we fell for the classic blunder, Jackson. We've never been asked this question.
The first one is never get involved in a land war in Asia.
Jackson, we'll start with you. What do you think is your favorite Star Wars character?
The definite favorite is Darth Vader. Darth Vader's full character arc, just from the transition of Anakin Skywalker to essentially that like 25-year gap of just like the weird inner turmoil that he went through. I'm just obsessed with that style of writing. I don't know if you've seen the tattoo, but Mr. Obi-Wan Kenobi is also my favorite. I have his tattoo lightsaber.
I'm glad to see that, because I heard about that. I was listening to your guys' podcast and I heard you talking about that tattoo.
Yeah, it's I love.
We have a fan of the show on the show.
Yeah,
yeah.
For all the
and
same
I don't
reasons.
I don't know if your listeners have already heard your favorite Star Wars characters, but I haven't gotten to that point of the podcast yet. If you've already shared it,
we've actually explicitly talked about our favorite characters yet.
Well, there you go. You're welcome, listeners.
That's for our actual like Imperial Eyes episode. We'll just talk about our favorites. Yeah.
There you go.
I think it's so hard to choose a favorite character because, like I always say, it's like trying to choose a favorite child.
You're a big fan of Dexter Jester, the diner owner.
Oh my God, Dexter Jester is. He just,
underrated,
I want to give him a big old hug. I love Dexter. But
I want him to make me a sandwich and then I want to give him a hug. Some greasy diner food. It's gotta be so good.
Star Wars patty melt.
No, but I think that, whenever I think of Star Wars, I think the first character that comes to mind is Anakin. And I'm talking pre-Vader Anakin, because when I was a kid, the only Star Wars that I knew was the prequels, because I didn't even watch the original trilogy until probably a couple years into my Star Wars journey. But I think that Anakin's story is so, like Jackson was saying, it is so tragic and complex and human. And I think that's what connects to me so much about Anakin / Vader. And I'm also a big Kenobi guy. I just like the Jedi. I love the Jedi a lot.
Yeah.
They just the aspect and the way of the Jedi and the journey that a lot of Jedi go through is something that speaks to me and moves me a lot. And I also, who can't love the walking carpet Chewbacca?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yep. I love a good Chewie. But yeah, I think that is a very rough estimation of what I can think. Maybe tomorrow the answer will be different, but right now those are my favorite.
It changes, and it probably also changes as you grow and develop as a person, because it depends on like who you connect with.
Yeah,
you know?
that's.
But thanks for sharing yours with me, guys. I appreciate that.
For sure. Just a couple more questions before we actually dive into this Empire discussion.
Yeah, sure.
Why? This is a very broad question to answer however you want to, but. Mm-hmm. Why do you love Star Wars? What speaks to you when it comes to Star Wars?
Yeah, that's also a great question. And I've been thinking about that too, because I do love Star Wars and my mind goes there a lot. It's such an inspiring place. And it's so creative and imaginative. And I think that I connected with it so much as a kid, because I was the one outside running around with a stick, pretending it was a lightsaber, playing with my brothers and sisters. And I think that Star Wars just created such an amazing world full of diverse and interesting characters, amazing like vehicles and planets and worlds and stories that you could get lost and you felt like it was a world of possibilities. You could hop on a spaceship and travel anywhere in the galaxy.
Yeah.
And I think that really just inspired me and the creative and imaginative side of me to just be more open to the creativity and exploration, adventure, and imagination in the universe, and was a big part of like developing me to be interested in what I'm interested in now, and the ideas and all of that coming to fruition. And I think that was such a big part of that. And that's why I keep coming back to it, because it's just such a fun place to play mentally.
And I think that a big contributor of why we connect to Star Wars so much, especially as kids, is the world is introduced to us so lived in. It's it feels like it exists. It actually does exist in a galaxy far, far away somewhere else.
Organic and natural.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing that I love about Star Wars is it feels like that there are possibilities and that there are ways that this story, this epic saga, could maybe be real. Who knows? A galaxy far, far away. These types of characters, it's easy to connect to this type of story. Yeah, cool. Before we get into the discussion really quick, I just wanted to ask you, what of all the things that have been announced that are coming out Star Wars wise in the future, what do you think you're most excited for? What are your most anticipated Star Wars movies or TV shows that are coming out?
Yeah, there are so many coming out, and I'm so excited just to be digging more into the world of Star Wars. I would say, man, it's hard to pick like just one, so I'm going to have to give you like a top three.
Go for it.
I think in third place, the what's the show that's going to be kind of anime inspired coming out?
Star Wars Visions, yes.
Visions. I am very excited about that because I've seen some of the YouTube videos of creatives making that, and it's just so engaging and visually appealing that I'm very excited to see what like a Disney actual production of something like that is going to be. So like number 3, that's where that is. I had them in my head and I forget. So it was that. Anything Old Republic. So whatever they got coming out or they're talking about that's going to be Old Republic related. I remember, so I don't play a lot of video games, but I love watching video game trailers because they're like movie trailers to me. I love like the story and the animation and the art and just kind of like imagining the world and the stories that come out. And I remember watching the like 3-part trailer for Star Wars The Old Republic game and just loving everything about that and being like, oh, I want a movie set in this time period with these characters, with these ships, with this world. So I'm very excited to see if that, what they're going to do with that. And then probably number 1 is going to be Book of Boba Fett.
Wow.
That was such a surprise. But like I said before, Boba Fett has been one of my favorite characters. He was so cool in the original. The Slave One is my favorite Star Wars ship of all time, always has been. And I love that in The Mandalorian we started to see a little bit more of who he is. And I'm very, very excited to continue that and get to see what are they going to do, like actually focusing on Boba Fett instead of being a side character in all these other things he's been a side character in. So that would have to be, it may shift, but that's kind of what I'm looking forward to.
Awesome. Yeah, if you are looking for something that is in like this Old Republic / High Republic era, the Acolyte show is going to be like a live action, like Sith based, like before Phantom Menace era show that I hear is supposed to be
Acolyte,
pretty cool.
Yeah. That's the one.
How do you feel about the announcement of Kenobi, the Kenobi series?
Very curious and very excited about that.
Yeah, that has been my main word to describe my excitement is curious.
It's so interesting just because a lot of Kenobi's story has already been told.
Yeah.
Or I would think, right? So we've seen him in the prequel trilogy, we've seen him in Clone Wars, and then we've seen Alec Guinness as him in the original trilogy. There's a little bit of a gap in between there. I mean, there's probably a lot of stuff. There's like when he and Qui-Gon were training, but help me zero in. Have they announced anything about when the show is going to be taking place timeline wise?
So
is it going to be like his Tatooine years before?
Around 10 years after Revenge of the Sith.
So in between, like right in the middle of 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Because it's a 20-year gap in between those two.
Yeah, it's something. It's like 20
yeah.
something years. Yeah. But yeah, I'm just curious because me and Jackson have been talking about this a lot. If they say that there's going to be a battle between Vader and Kenobi again, like the Battle of the Century, it'll be a Hayden versus Ewan 2.0. Will that take away from their final duel that we see in A New Hope, do you think? Or do you think they will find a way to make it work?
That's my worry.
Yeah.
When I heard about Hayden coming back, I mean, I'm very excited to see him back, and obviously very excited to see Ewan back. I mean, loved him, and like it's going to be so cool to see that. But that's kind of my worry because the idea is that they have this separation from their final confrontation on Mustafar and to that gap to when they reconnect as Vader and Old Ben. And I mean, they may be able to find a way to do it and it may be awesome, but that is one of the things I'm curious and a little worried about because that gap creates that dynamic that, Vader says he senses a presence he hasn't felt in a long time.
Yeah. And
it's just, it may undercut that a little bit, either their final confrontation on Mustafar or their other one, and we'll have to see.
Disney's like 10 years is a long time. It'll still work.
Yeah, I mean, in like the Star Wars universe, it is. How much stuff have people forgotten in between trilogies?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah, good Lord.
Yeah, but like I've said, it really depends on the execution and how they go about it. Because I think there are ways to go about it to where it can still have that emotional effect that we see in A New Hope with them having met in between that Mustafar duel and that final duel. But who knows? We'll see what happens. At this point, there's no telling. They haven't even started production yet. I believe they start in like a month or two. So that'll be fun to see. But anyway, enough with the casual conversation. we're going to talk about what people are here to listen to us talk about, and that is The Empire Strikes Back. Debatably, the best Star Wars movie of all time. We'll get into that.
And we're here to debate that.
Yeah, we are. But Addison, we will start with you. What are your just initial big picture thoughts and reactions to this movie in general?
So I rewatched this movie just this afternoon in kind of prep for this, because I don't know how long it's been since I've actually seen this through, like for the last time. I've been meaning to do a Star Wars chronology movie-wise at some point in time, but just haven't been able to get around to it, trying to keep up on the other Star Wars content coming out. I loved rewatching it. It was so great to come back to the original trilogy, where it all started, and it just showed it's such a good middle film and film on its own that it was so enjoyable start to finish. It brought up so many more questions, developed characters so much more, and really just dug into the world more. And I came away with just a new appreciation for it after watching it.
Wow. Yeah. This movie, I would say, is the best sequel to a film of all time.
Yeah.
And I think that this is also one of the most emotionally deep Star Wars films, only behind The Last Jedi for me. But Jackson, I know you said you've watched this recently. You watched it earlier today. What is kind of, after rewatching it for however, the whatever time, what is your, give us a little brief review / reaction to this most recent rewatch of Empire?
I've already seen it and nitpicked it on my own personal stuff, but like rewatching it for this conversation to nitpick about this, it's that character growth. It's everybody goes through such big transitions in this movie that by the end of it, you're just like, you're exhausted. You're like, wow, like a lot just happened. And I think this movie brilliantly just is able to pace all of that, and it feels like nothing. From start to finish, once you're done with it, you're like, oh, it's over. I myself know what each moment of the movie that happens, but it ends and you're just like, oh, there was so much just happened, and it's over now. I guess I gotta watch the next one to keep going.
Imagine being back in 1980 and having to wait 3 years for a follow-up to that movie.
Dude, it's not.
Yeah, that would have been crazy.
That would be like if we just got the sequel to The Last Jedi last year.
Mm-hmm.
Or if we just got, if we were watching The Force Awakens and we got that big, cliffhanger, and we didn't get a follow-up to that until 2018. That's wild to me. But
it's so crazy. I mean, that's like it's a different time.
Yeah.
That it just took that long, and now we're just so used to stuff getting cranked out. I mean, Marvel has spoiled us think of
that was the
that.
First
even
thing
if
I
you're
thought
waiting
of.
for a sequel, to a certain movie, there's a bunch of other Marvel stuff that then you're watching while you're waiting for that. And that would have been so crazy.
Then we had Infinity War and Endgame a year apart from each other. I mean, how much more spoiled can you get?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think rewatching Empire, this is about the third time just in 2021 that I've watched Empire. And
nice.
I'm confident in saying that it gets better every single time I watch it, because I pick up on little things.
There's always just a new level of appreciation every time. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
The truly good movies do that. There's always something new to find.
Yeah, and I think that, well, first off, the writing is so good. And the dialogue specifically is so charming and quippy and cunning that it just I think that is another reason why Star Wars is so relatable, is because they're not sitting there talking, they're not. It's kind of like Star Trek. I think that's the problem with Star Trek that I have is a lot of times they get into all of like the technical space things and they talk about all these different planets and stuff. And with Star Wars, the dialogue is very personal, and the dialogue is very. It's almost like how we talk now. But it's just they're just in a galaxy far, far away. That's why it's so relatable, and I think that's why I love this movie so much. Because we get moments with Leia and Han, and like Han being on that Tauntaun going out to save Luke, and he says, "Yeah, well, I'll see you in hell." It goes away. Like it's just so great.
So that I'll see you in hell specifically. I was watching with my brother and he brought that up and he was like, "Oh, so there's an afterlife in Star Wars. We know there's a hell now." And I was like, "Yeah, I guess we do," because at the time he was probably just saying a line and they didn't think about the repercussions. But now coming back to being a full universe, I mean, there's got to be a hell, right? Because he said it in the movie.
Let's go to Star Wars hell.
well, we're expecting the comic series about Star Wars hell here in a few years. But I think another great, we're kind of talking about, we'll get into our main opinion, all the quotes and stuff in a little bit, but another quote that really just is so good and it sticks out to me is whenever Han and Leia are arguing in like the halls of that in the halls of that Hoth base. he's talking about, what does he say when he's talking about how Chewie and that Leia should kiss Chewie? He's like, you could use a good kiss when he's walking away. So good.
Yeah, she's like, I'd rather kiss a Wookiee. She's like, I can arrange that.
That's it. That's the line. Yeah, I only wrote down he could use a good kiss in all caps, and that's all I wrote
also
down.
Also a good line. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that this movie kind of revolutionized making, like, it kind of revolutionized sequels as a whole and just what you can do to move a narrative forward and move a story forward. How do you think that Empire shaped movie sequels going forward?
That's a good question, because just off of my top of my head, I'm trying to think about what movie sequels like we had before this, and I'm not up on my like cinema history. So if you guys,
Godfather Part 2, like that's the only other big
I was like, what notable? Indiana Jones post Star Wars,
like sequels weren't a huge thing at this point in time. Like a lot of movies were just like, you made a movie and that was the movie. You move on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. This is like sequels and sagas and that like trilogies even were so unheard of at this point because it was so expensive to invest in a property for that long.
Yeah. So it was definitely something that like books would do because that's been, sequels and sagas have been around for a long time in books, but yeah, it hadn't quite made the transition. I don't know. I think it let people know that you can tell one story over multiple movies and you will get people to come back. Yeah. And continue to be interested in to watch that movie. And if that worked, it opened up a whole world of like, oh, well, maybe we don't have to completely write a whole new story with new characters every time we make a movie. We already kind of know where the story's going and where our characters are, and we can build a larger story that develops things more now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that A New Hope ended in it kind of wrapped a pretty bow on that story and kind of made it seem like this was the only movie we were getting. And I think where Empire excels is being able to pick up on a story that seemed like it was done and take the important themes and the important aspects of that story and just run with it and just make it into something epic. And I think that's what's so cool about Empire is that it raises more questions and it also asks plus answers those questions. And I think that's what's just so cool.
I think that's a really good point. And the fact that New Hope ended in such a pretty bow, so to speak, was probably a relic of that age where we were like, we don't know if sequels will work yet. let's just make sure we make one movie that can kind of stand on its own.
Exactly.
And then, and I think it was great because Empire ramped up immediately. It didn't even like have to take some time to be like, oh, well, this is where we are now.
Yeah,
everything
it throws
wasn't
you into
fine.
the action.
And boom, we're right into it. Yeah.
Jackson, what do you think?
I think the big thing about kind of what Addison was saying about how, it's you took these characters and, Braydon talked about like the important themes and essentially continued on. I think Empire really it fleshed out everything in a sense that I don't think anyone's ever seen before, especially with it being a sequel. But I think the big thing it taught everyone was that there can be consequences in movies. That's kind of the Empire Strikes Back. It's not supposed to be another fun, go happy, like cool adventure. There's going to be a pretty bow at the end of the movie. And I think that that's what made this movie such a bigger hit and phenomenon, is that everyone walked out with just like, staring at their hands, like, who am I? Like, where do we go from here? And that's such a magical thing that you can pull off and be able to just achieve, especially with your writing and your directing. Irvin Kershner is someone who I don't think ever made a movie before Empire Strikes Back. And George Lucas was like, you can get my vision ready. And Irvin Kershner was like, yeah, sure. Why not? Yeah.
So actually there's a couple chapters about this in this book called Star Wars Conquered the Universe. And Irvin Kershner was actually one of George Lucas's film professors at UCLA. And what he did is, so originally, I don't remember, either George had someone else set to direct Empire or George himself was going to direct Empire. And then something happened and he realized, oh crap, I need a director. And kind of the emergency choice was his film director, his film professor, Irvin Kershner. And he kind of went and, it took Irvin out for a drink and kind of convinced him to direct the sequel, because I don't think George had the time to sit down and figure out how he's going to direct this thing. He wanted like an outside perspective on Star Wars. And Irvin Kershner at first didn't want to, because, the fan base got so huge and the expectations were extraordinary. Like, there was no way anybody in their right mind besides George Lucas would want to direct these films. And over the course of the night, Lucas slowly started to convince Irvin Kershner to direct Star Wars, and he was like, you know what? Screw it. I'll direct him. Fine, I'll direct it. And that's
drunk
kind of the
Irvin
story
Kershner
of like
finally gave
how
in.
Irvin Kershner got in there is George Lucas's film professor. He just kind of convinced him. He was like, all right, whatever, fine. And it ended up being one of the best films, arguably, of all time. But I just wanted to ask Addison, first, what is your first experience with this film specifically? When do you think is the first time you watched Empire?
Oh man, I think that I remember watching through the original trilogy with some like family friends growing up. We went over to their house, like made snacks, went down to the basement and watched through the original trilogy, and then I think we made it some way into the prequel trilogy, because at that point that had come out as well. So it had to have been quite a long time ago. I'm trying to remember. I don't really remember what my initial I don't have any strong memory of the first time I watched it, or like my initial thoughts, or kind of how I felt about it at that time. Cool.
Yeah. I know I have a pretty interesting story about my first experience with this movie, because
I'd love to hear it.
Originally, like I said earlier, I don't really have a memory in my life where Star Wars wasn't already a thing. I don't remember my initial discovery of Star Wars, but my only experience in the first few years of my life was with the prequels, and it was with, all the characters I knew and loved from the prequels. And I don't remember if I didn't know about the original trilogy or if I just didn't care to know about the original trilogy. And one time I went to, I think it was was it Blockbuster? Yeah, it was like Blockbuster in like 2004, 2005.
Yeah.
And I was looking through all of the movies, and I went to the section where Star Wars was. And I was looking at the different covers. There was like some of the prequels and then the original trilogy. And I saw A New Hope, and it was Luke with his lightsaber and a couple other things. Empire, and there was a thing of the Emperor, Vader, and Luke with his lightsaber, and a couple other, like, he was like Han and Leia and stuff. And the only reason I chose Empire is because I saw the Emperor and like, oh, that guy looks kind of cool. I'm going to get this one. And that is the reason why I watched Empire first of all the original trilogy.
Finish it and be like, there's not even really an Emperor in this.
Yeah, well, because this was like whenever like the original special editions were coming out. And like, I think that's why they were like featured, because this was when, you know, like, I think it was like the 2004 special editions had just come out. And yeah, I was like, wow, this guy looks kind of cool. I'm going to get this one. And little did I know he was going to be in it for 5 minutes. But yeah, I think that
worth it.
That being my first experience watching, because I had no idea what was going on. When you're like 7 years old, you're just watching it because, oh, look, cool laser swords and gunfights.
It looks cool. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jackson, what about you? What do you think is that you can remember? What was your first experience with this movie?
I don't remember my first time, I think, watching this movie, because it's one of those that's always just been in my head. So I know the deepest rooted memory of this scene is the scene where I think it's one of the Vader meditation, the meditation station, the pod that he's got, but it's the one when he's talking to the two admirals through the screen, and he starts choking the one through the screen. I remember like being a child and being like, "That's
Admiral
awesome."
Ozzel and Captain Piet. Yes.
Is that the two? Yeah.
Yes.
The not yet promoted Captain Piet.
He's about to be promoted to Admiral.
About to be promoted, yeah.
Like, I was thinking right after he got promoted, I wanted him to be like, so does this come with a pay raise, or like,
do I get his
who do I talk to about this? Yeah, right. Health insurance, or
what kind of benefits come out of this?
Is
there a
dental
benefits package? Yeah.
No, all of the Empire's health insurance goes towards Vader. No one else gets it.
Yeah, Vader needs it. Trust me.
It's all that back-to-baths he's got to have, you know?
Yeah, the daily back-to-baths, the back-to-bubble baths. Now that we're kind of getting to the meat of the movie, let's just dive in. We'll start with you, Addison. What moments, just in general, what scenes, moments, things that speak to you in this movie, what are some of your favorite Empire moments?
Yeah. Let's see. I starting right off the bat, the AT-AT assault on Hoth. Luke getting out in the his snow speeder, going and having to figure out how to like take down the AT-AT walkers, and just the conflict and the timing and the pressure building to try to get people out. There's so much going on. Like, each side of the conflict, they have their objectives, and you just see everything kind of playing out like this dance. I loved Han and Chewie's interaction, specifically when they're trying to fix the Falcon, and he's like, "No, this goes over here." Got it?
Forth, yeah.
Like, runs back, and he's like, "Start it up, start it up." He's like, "Whoa, turn it off."
Yeah.
I love that. That was fantastic. I think. I'm probably going to go out of order because this is just one that's going to come to me. Like,
go for it.
First time meeting Yoda. I mean, especially coming back and watching that after seeing the prequels and all of the Clone Wars, and just how much of that Yoda we've seen, to come and see Yoda like this, you're like, what has happened to him?
And you can definitely tell this is the first time he's been with a human being in like,
for a long time.
Years.
What they are,
Yep. Yeah, exactly. But then I loved when when Yoda like gets serious and starts talking to Ben, and like Luke starts to realize like, oh, I misjudged this guy. There is something a lot more going on to Yoda beneath the surface, and we start to see a little bit of that old Yoda that we saw still there, and that some of this was an act to protect himself, and brought on also by being in solitude for so long.
Yeah, and that's kind of Yoda's test, right? Of like Luke, he's being an imbecile and just being like this annoying little creature to test Luke's patience and make sure that, you know, Luke has the capacity just to have the patience to be a Jedi, and see how much of a Skywalker he is.
Yeah,
and you understand, like, once we hear Ben talking to him, like, Yoda, there's a plan. There's a plan, and Yoda is sticking to that plan. And the way he treats Luke from the beginning up until whenever Luke leaves his training, there's a whole arc there in and of itself. It's so cool to see even Yoda, just from the beginning of this movie, how he acts to the end, especially whenever we get him, you know, one of my favorite moments of all time, even in Star Wars in general, is Yoda getting Luke's X-Wing out of the swamp, and that the John Williams score comes up, and it's just such a powerful, moving moment.
The camera angles on that too, and just like that was so fantastic when, you know, he's like, it's too heavy, it's too big, and he's like, you know, size matters not, or whatever he says, and it's like,
he's like, do you judge me by my size?
Exactly, right? And you get the classic do or do not, there is no try.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, great stuff. And he just shows, like, Luke, like, it's not about how big things are. It's about what's connecting everything and tapping into that.
Yeah, and it's about your perspective on things.
Yeah.
How you view things.
Well, and that line that closes off that whole, Yoda lifting the X-Wing out of the lake and the swamp, and it's I don't believe it, and that is why you fail.
That's why you fail.
Exactly.
That's so powerful.
Like, it just hits
fantastic.
Such a powerful moment.
Oh, love it. Love that. I love the moment where Han does the trick where he hides on the back of the watchtower of the Star Destroyer. Just fantastic. And then floats away with the trash. And then Boba Fett in the Slave One is there following him. And you're like, you outsmarted the Empire, but there's someone who knows your tricks, Solo. The scene in the Space Slug where they're getting out and it's like, the cave's collapsing. This isn't a cave.
Yeah.
So good. So good. And then obviously, I mean, Vader's fight with Luke at the end, so many good moments with that, and just that's such a good way for like character to develop while also like action going on and storytelling ramping up to the big moment at the end there. Also, I really love the very like within the first 10 minutes or so of the film, Luke cutting off the Yeti creature's arm, and it's like, foreshadowing right off the bat, you know?
Yep. Yeah. Might as well, since you brought it up, we can get into the meat of this movie during the climax, the whole Vader Luke duel that goes on in Bespin, because I know Jackson really wants to talk about this too.
I just want to talk about Vader.
The emotional weight of this duel and what ends up coming of it is so just awesome. Just to put it simply, it's just awesome. And, the choreography of this fight is so raw and unhinged, and it feels right. Every moment in this fight feels so right.
It's so important for the overall story of Star Wars, because the first time we see Vader fight is with, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Luke is watching, and then he gets like his one chance against the big bad in this movie, and he's obviously outmatched, but he just barely hangs on and, runs away with his tail between his legs, leading up to, Return of the Jedi and the duel there. And just, this is such a critical moment because Vader and Luke come together for just these brief meetings in this long elaborate dance. It's so so well done and really tells that story so well.
Yeah, Jackson, what do you think? I know this is something you wanted to talk about.
I have a lot of Vader talking points, so most of this fight scene is going to be kind of centered around him. But initially coming off, it's the two different styles of just how the fight goes, and I love that that's kind of how it's shown. Of Vader's just screwing with him. He's the whole plan's to toss him in the carbon pit, and then it isn't until Luke roundhouse kicks him off the platform and Vader actually gets angry, and then it's when they turn each other's lightsabers off and they're looking for each other that my heart starts racing. It's the thought of Vader hiding somewhere in a large room and all you can hear is his breathing. Like, that's terrifying to me.
That's the stuff of nightmares.
And even in that fight too, when they start fighting again, they're clashing lightsabers, and it's when Vader's throwing stuff at him, and Vader's not even moving. Like, he's just standing there watching him as he's tossing boxes and chairs and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then
it's all
he's just focusing his force energy with his lightsaber, just sitting there.
And how scary that, demeaning that he carries, that you realize, he's doing this and it's this whole conversation or whatever. And then you realize it's this giant metal, like giant black metal monster that you're just the face doesn't have any expressions on him. And as they're fighting and holding, it's this big moment, Vader just tosses another box at him and just hits him. And, the blood breaks the window open. And, I think when it comes to the growth that happens in this fight is Luke walks in knowing that he's about to face probably the most dangerous thing he'll ever encounter in his entire life. And while he's brave enough to go in to do it to save his friends, by the end of the fight, he realized what Obi-Wan and Yoda were trying to warn him really of, and not more of the truth of Vader is your father, but more of Vader is not something to test and play with. Vader is not someone who, you think you can just take him on in a fight and you'll call it a day, even if you both walk away from it.
Yeah.
Vader is a very dangerous being. And throughout, I think this movie itself, this is kind of the Vader movie. This is what, we
he
see
kind of
how
looms over the whole movie.
He's just obsessed and just so driven to capturing the rebels and, Skywalker. And it's in that final moment that Vader's arc goes from let's get him to, let's just capture him and get him to the Emperor and we'll follow the plan. And if I want to, betray the Emperor and take over the galaxy with my son, I'll do that later. And then the fight, and then it changes to where it's, no, this is your main priority, because this is the moment I think Vader decided that he sees how much tenacity and how much, bravery and Skywalker is in this boy, that he's like, it's like he's just, all of his plans are thrown out. And most of that is also, I think, because Vader's angry near the second half of that fight. Is Vader gets upset and he starts actually unloading on Luke and actually showing him what power he can do. And he does just as little as chop his hand off. And, in the movie, you're like, this is that's crazy. That's so huge and whatnot. Yeah. But for Vader, it was, I need to teach him a lesson to show him that there is much more power available to that he can access. And
you can almost tell that, in this fight, Vader is low key holding back. Absolutely. If he wanted to, he could just take Luke down right there, but he doesn't want to do that. He has a duty to take Luke to the Emperor and get Luke to, obey the commands.
It's not until they're on the bridge of the big, dome that they're in that Vader finally kind of loses it. And he starts, just wailing on Luke, just beating him up. And it gets to the point that he, psychs him out and chops his arm off. And Vader's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that to you. And Luke's, screaming and whatnot.
Well, what I found really interesting is that move that he used to chop his hand off. He also used that at the very beginning of the fight to disarm Luke, because he does a swip and knocks his lightsaber out of his hand.
That's my favorite line of that fight too, is when Luke goes, I've learned a lot more than you would have think, and he immediately gets disarmed.
Yeah. Is that right after he says, you've learned much, but you're not a Jedi yet?
Yeah.
Which I love that line too. But yeah, it's so I love like bookends and things being foreshadowed. And so we saw like Luke cutting off the did you say the name of that creature earlier and I cut you off, Jackson?
It's a wampa.
Wampa. Cutting off the hand of that wampa. And then him getting his hand cut off, but then that move, that disarming move, and then right after it's used again, because Vader already knows Luke can't defend against that move, and so he uses it to its full potential and be able to actually literally disarm your opponent.
Yeah, and it brings us, this whole fight brings us to this climactic moment that is probably one of the most iconic lines in cinema history, and it's the "No, I am your father." And probably one of the biggest twists in cinema history. Yeah. In that moment, Vader says, "Join me, and together we can rule the galaxy as father and son." I just want you guys' perspectives on this, because I have a perspective too. Is that Vader legitimately wanting to team up with Luke and overthrow the Emperor, or is this Vader trying to bait Luke to go with him, and then Vader can turn him into the Emperor? Addison, we'll start with you. What do you kind of take from that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that he is actually asking Luke to join him, because we've already seen Anakin ask people to join him and talk about my new empire, like at the end of Revenge of the Sith. So we know that
Anakin wants empathy.
He wants
someone to be on his side for once.
He also doesn't want to be alone.
Yeah.
He, was a slave, but he had a lot of kids, friends growing up. He had his mom and then was taken from his mom. He had the Jedi and then was taken from the Jedi. And even though he's like the Emperor or Palpatine has been there, that's not. The thing is, the Emperor started to build a relationship with him that we saw, but then in this series is barely there at all. So has definitely put Vader by the wayside and is just using him as an errand boy, or as you got to do what I want you to do. And so I have to think, it could be going the other way, but based on that, Vader, he is connected, and he knows, he finds out he's closely connected. He's like, this is my son. He wants to connect again there, and he's probably very lonely. He's living his own life, and no one else is at his level or has the power to be able to do that. And yeah, and he feels like there's been a lot of injustice in the world and the galaxy too. That's
a good point. Yeah, Jackson, what do you kind of take away from this?
I'm gonna piggyback right off of that and just continue that thought of Vader not being alone is the perfect explanation of all of his motives. It's just he does things so he can try and share the experiences that he wants in his life. And I agree with Addison, is that he's telling Luke to join him because in Vader's head, the person that guided him through to turning to the dark side, used him the whole time, used him to just become this powerhouse and this great force of nature, and he's just kind of forced to just go along with it and just be this lackey. And it explains the kind of tonal shift of Vader between A New Hope and this one, is that Vader's kind of fed up at this point. He's ready to do the things that he wants. And when it's presented to him that, the boy who blew up the Death Star is actually his kid, he's like, perfect. He was like, not only am I just this unyielding amount of power, I now have discovered my offspring who probably has the same amount of unyielding power. And I can see Vader making the decisions of wanting to try and follow the way of the Sith. There can only be two. Let's overthrow Palpatine, and you and I will be these great forces of power. And I think the what's the word I want to use? The holdback of that with Vader is that he himself probably thinks that he and Luke together are literally the strongest thing that has ever walked the galaxy, until, the Force will modify and give him something stronger. But in that moment, yeah, he's totally asking Luke, come with me. Like what I don't know exactly what he says, but he's like, we'll end this, this conflict, this unneeded conflict. And, he was like, you and me we'll do it together. Like, we have that ability and we have that power.
And he knows that him and Luke, if they team together, they could easily take down the Emperor.
Oh, absolutely. Like,
well, the Emperor says that, Vader says that the Emperor is afraid of Luke because he thinks he can take him down.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's 100% true.
And I think in that moment too, Luke's definitely like, no, because you're evil, and Vader's like, yeah, but like, listen to me, like, listen to what we can do. Don't put it in a good versus evil thing. Like, think about what we can create. And by that time, Luke's already hopped off of the big satellite. Whatever.
He eats himself off.
Yeah, he just drops.
But that is the beginning of Luke realizing that Vader is not just evil, and that is a more complex and complicated character than what he originally thought.
And he's so shrouded with turmoil in that moment too, because it's I think that scene wouldn't have been as much of a confirmed impact if it wasn't for Luke's reaction, because once Vader says it, Luke knows it. Luke's like, you're 100% right. You are my dad. There's no there's no
way you couldn't feel that in the Force some way or another.
Yeah, it's just like they're genuine
Search your feelings, you know it to be true.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There you go.
Exactly.
And it's funny because the Emperor says that to Vader when he's telling him that Luke is the son of Anakin Skywalker. All of these like callbacks within the movie. So good.
Yeah. One thing I kind of wanted to ask, at what point do you think that Vader knew that at least one of his kids, I guess he didn't know that he had twins. At what point do you think that Vader knew his kid was alive?
Are you asking like before the Emperor told him?
Yes. So do you think that was the moment, or do you think there was a different point in time in which Anakin figured that, oh crap, my kids are still alive, I can feel it? What moment do you think that was?
Let me kind of answer this let me tell you that there is a canonical Vader comic where he hires Boba Fett to essentially track them down, and that encounter in it is a different comic, so I haven't read that. But a Boba Fett, he's like, they got away, but I figured out the kid's name. And Vader's like, oh, who is it? And he goes, Skywalker. I don't know who he is. He's like, but that's the name. And Vader's like, oh, cool. Like, thank you. Like, you can leave now. Like, that's cool. And the final panel, like the page of the comic is just the panels. And it's Vader like standing in his quarters in his ship, and he's just looking out the window. And then it flashes back to Padme. And then it cuts back.
That's
and
powerful.
And it's him sitting there. And then it cuts back to like a drawing of like Anakin and Padme and Naboo, and as he's standing there, the glass starts like breaking. The glass starts like ripping up and shredding, and it's just like that's how the final like panel of it is, as it keeps doing flashbacks, and it does like there's like a comic where him and Luke have a fight, and he's like detailing his face, and the final like panel of it is Vader standing there with the entire window just shattered.
Wow.
And it's just so like Vader knew, Vader knew the second he heard his name. And I bet you when it was like, this kid blew up the Death Star, Vader was like, there's something about him.
You have to imagine that Vader, in one way or another, felt Luke in the Force just whenever they were in each other's presence. There had to have been some kind of connection there one way, because the Skywalker bloodline is way too powerful for you to not feel it if you're in the presence of a Skywalker, I think that it's kind of inevitable. Like he had to have at least been suspicious, at least been like, what's up with this kid? Why am I feeling this way? I
would assume it to be like the moment when Luke uses the Force to shoot the bombs in the Death Star, is that as Vader's spinning away, he's like, there's a weird amount of Force energy happening right now.
A couple of my I guess I'll go next. A couple of my favorite moments is I love all the Hoth stuff. I think all of the Hoth scenes are so underrated. And I always remember playing Lego Star Wars, the video game. The scene you play whenever you're in like the snow speeders and you have to use the cable to tie around the AT-AT's legs. I've always thought that is such an ingenious way. Like the writing is so good of like, of course that's how you would take one of those things down. Like you can't blow it up with those little blasters that are attached to the snow speeder. So I love all the Hoth stuff, and I think that all of Luke's training on Dagobah is so important to just witness and take lessons from as a human.
Oh yeah.
Like just in general, not even just how to be a Jedi. Like that's life lessons Yoda is teaching us right there. Just like this whole,
I agree.
He talks about how Luke is always his whole life. Yoda's been watching Luke his whole life, and he's always noticed how Luke looks off to the horizon and is never present. He's always just looking for something better, like a grass is always greener kind of thing. And Yoda's kind of saying that you'll see that once you are present and you just you soak up the present moment you are in, you will find how much easier life becomes and how much easier things are to deal with whenever you're dealing with them one thing at a time. And I think that's kind of what Yoda means when he's saying you need to stay in the present. Does that make any sense? I just think that Yoda's lessons in this entire movie, I just want Yoda to be around me telling me what to do and how to make decisions for the rest of my life.
I mean, maybe then I could do a one-handed handstand. That'd be pretty sweet too.
Yeah, that'd be nice too. Or maybe use the Force to take an X-wing out of a swamp. Who knows?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah, and then obviously, all of the Han and Leia banter, it's just written well. Like the performances are so good. You completely believe the dynamic that Han and Leia have in this entire movie.
Well, you believe like a big thing I have with the original trilogy, I guess even on all these Star Wars movies, is they don't do an incredible job in telling you how much time has been in between, especially if you were watching them together, which is kind of inevitable these days. So I think the Han and Leia dialogue's really good at establishing the time difference. They kind of talk about in the beginning of Hoth that they've been here for a minute. They've had this relationship has grown to the point that they are now able to openly talk about it actually happening as a thing, and you can tell
they're already starting to get sick of each other.
They're so annoyed with casual flirting that they're just like arguing even more.
It's like getting under their skin. And Han has some of the best quotes of this. I have a whole list of just awesome Han quotes. We have the "I love you, I know" thing, which is
classic.
So, I mean, just the fact that wasn't even written, how that was just a Harrison Ford, like, Han wouldn't say "I love you too." Like, that's not a Han thing. Like, it just speaks to how well Harrison Ford knew this character.
And it's so funny too, because it wraps up like the whole time Han's been trying to prove to Leia that like she's got feelings for him. The whole time. He's like, I know it.
Don't get excited.
Don't lie to yourself. I know it. And then, in the brink of what everyone thinks he's gonna die, and she's like, I love you. She blurts out. He's like, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Stupid.
And
he's like, I've been telling you this whole time. What are you talking about?
He's like, I know. But like, finally you admit it when I'm about to die.
And it's so calming too. He's just like, I know. He's like,
that's just what's so genius about that performance is, imagine if he would have just said, "Oh, I love you too."
Yeah.
And how like almost cringy that would be. Like that's just so Han. That's such a Han line. And Harrison knew that character so well.
Well, he's saying "I love you" as well, like in the way he says "I know." It's everything that you guys said, but you also see that "I know" is him saying I love you too, and I know you, and I understand this, and like it's going to be okay.
He uses the moment.
Conveys all of that. Yeah.
He uses
so
it
there's so much.
Yeah. Sorry.
There's so much. No, you're totally fine. There's so much love in that too, in the way that he shows love, and so it's just so nuanced. It's amazing to see.
And it's just so crazy how that those two words, that one line, can say so much. And say so much about a character and the characterization. Yeah. I mean, as an actor, like delivery of lines just in general is so important, and like you have to know exactly how things should be delivered and why characters are saying certain things. So I think
that's why it's so important to know your character and make sure you dig into that. I mean, he shows that he really knows his character there. I mean, I think that we see that in a lot of these actors, they really, Star Wars characters, they knew themselves.
The physical acting of this movie, I think definitely outperforms some of the just spoken lines. Definitely watching it this round, some of Luke's lines are a little forced, but his actions and his reactions that he has, specifically when he's in the Hoth med bay and they're all checking on Luke, and Han makes the joke that Leia was all, buddy with me. So like, what's the point? Yeah. Luke, it cuts to Luke and he's all sad and depressed. And, now you're like, don't worry about it. It's not going to work out. But like, it's Mark Hamill's like genuine reaction, and the Vader, I am your father scene, the genuine heartbreak and turmoil that, Mark Hamill kind of put himself into for that one scene. It's such good just reactions.
Yeah.
Action.
And then that just leading to Mark Hamill later on in the movie, him just repeating like, you should have told me, Ben.
Ben, why didn't you tell me?
Ben, why didn't you tell me? Just like, you can tell like so much is crashing down and smashing into each other in his world, and he's like, this is so much more complicated than I thought it was going to be.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
What do I do now?
Mark Hamill, excuse my lack of knowing words, but Mark Hamill is so Mark Hamill in this movie. Because a lot of the lines that are written for Luke, especially in the Dagobah scene, are so they're so Muppets. Like they're so, hey, what are you doing? Hey, put that down. Watch it.
There was a lot of times that I was watching and I was like, I just feel like I'm watching a clip from a Muppet movie, which I kind of was, right? Like
we were watching it today.
It literally is a Muppet, right? Yeah.
We were watching it today and I looked over at Alexis and I went, it's Miss Piggy. And she like laughed at me and I went, no, I'm serious. I go, it's Frank Oz.
Yeah, it's literally.
I go, Yoda's real close to just like doing a karate chop and sounding like a pig who does like a late night show. Like,
yeah. And I think that there are ways to go about a lot of the Luke dialogue in this movie that don't make them sound the way they do, but I think it's Mark Hamill's delivery of a lot of those lines that make them sound so childish and Muppet-like.
Yoda, Dagobah, Yoda, Ben.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
My point exactly. And I think that a lot of this has to do with like, this was the 1970s still, whenever this was filmed. Like, a lot of the times you're still exaggerating a lot of your performances and, being still kind of like this is a weird word to use, but like a cartoon character almost. But yeah, we'll get into our favorite performances in just a second. But I think...
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that one of the most risk-taking, jarring things about this movie is the ending and the cliffhanger that we're left on, with Han getting put in carbonite, Luke and Leia kind of at a loss for what to do next, Lando with the Falcon and Chewie. And you come out of this movie, especially with not watching Return of the Jedi right after, you're kind of like, where the heck do we even go from here? Like, it's so devastating. How do you think that, you say this movie actually ended up ending like A New Hope, and it ends with a perfect, pretty bow wrapped around it, and it ends up being, a happy ending. Do you think that would alter people's view of this movie in general?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely.
It's The Empire Strikes Back. The whole movie is about consequences and the
loss.
bad guys. Yeah, and the bad guy or the bad guys getting it for a minute, and that you kind of just walk out with your only immediate plan is like rescue Han. Like I don't know where to walk, where to go.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true. Just for the story's sake, just the way a story fleshes out is you have to have that valley. Things have got to get worse. You have to set up the conflict. Things have to get more complicated before you can work to a really satisfying, conclusion. And if it was just like, they got away, they like blew up Vader's Star Destroyer and he got away again, but like they got Han back or whatever, and then they were like, all right, next we're gonna go take the Empire on again. Like it would just, I think it would lose a lot of its weight, and show like the kind of realism that things don't always go your way. And there are consequences to the actions that you take, but it doesn't mean they weren't the right actions to make.
Well, and it builds those stakes for Return of the Jedi the sense of like it is a last ditch effort. Like they have given their all already, so they have to give more, especially after the knockdown that they just received.
Oh yeah.
And at the end of the movie, we see Luke kind of calling out to Leia in the Force. Now, I think that during the filming of this movie, the filmmakers didn't exactly know for certain that Luke and Leia were siblings. I don't think. So, do we think that, because, at the beginning of this movie, you have like the whole Luke and Leia kiss thing. Do we think that moment where Luke calls out to Leia in the Force, do you think that was the filmmakers being like, oh, this could also be hinting that maybe Leia is also Force sensitive? Or do you think that deep down, Lucas kind of said, yeah, here's where we're going with this, they're siblings? What do you gather from, being a movie of the time and not really knowing where it was going from here? What do you think the Luke and Leia connection was intended to be?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think that they're definitely showing a connection there, and it could be just showing Luke like reaching out with the Force, because it's not like Leia reaching out to him, and you could come to the conclusion that it's just like a Luke-sided thing, or that there is a deeper connection there, And I don't know. I think
in the beginning, whenever they do have that kiss, I always think, oh yeah, that's funny because they didn't know they were siblings yet. But then I look at the end of the movie and I'm like, wait, but they have this Force connection. What's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
And it's.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's interesting because you're not sure if that kiss earlier is like, oh, are they gonna like be the ones who end up together? It's like, that doesn't really make sense. But at the end there, it could also be like, oh, maybe they're romantically supposed to be together, and that's why they have this like connection. Yeah. But it's interesting because we've already seen like the relationship with Han get to such like a deeper level. Then you're like, oh, she is still connected with him, but it's not romantic. There's something else going on here.
Yeah, that's kind of where my thought. I don't think initially when they did it, I don't know if the siblings was established yet, but definitely that there is a Force connected and that they themselves are connected. It's
just
not
spiritually.
Luke didn't just reach out to anyone who would grab. He reached out to Leia because probably in that moment, especially finding out his father, I wonder if like the Force just kind of connected them. And I think from that moment of Luke hanging from, the wires of Bespin is he is able to establish that there was a connection. You know, I think the kiss in the beginning, I always take it as Leia does it obviously to screw with Han, and that's kind of
jealous.
And Luke's the dumb kid who's like, wow, like look,
he's like,
likes me.
I got a kiss.
Exactly.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head with that, Jackson. I think that's exactly what that means.
And I think that, the filmmakers ended up using something like that to where initially audience will kind of be like, ooh, like, are they going to be a thing? And obviously they end up brother and sister, but it was more to set up that they themselves, those characters are connected, less than that they're friends, but they are connected to a sense of something deeper. And that deeper is that they're family and that they're both force sensitive.
Yeah. And great. I mean, it's interesting because this also comes after Yoda says there is another. So, we're thinking like, oh, what does Yoda mean by that? There's another what? And then the movie immediately goes and throws this little thing in there. We're like, what's going on here? There's some connection. This could be leading to, what Yoda was talking about.
Yeah. And speaking of that,
the movie's trying to.
A couple episodes ago, we had a question from a listener asking, whenever that happens and Yoda says, and I quote, "Now matters are worse, there is another." And as soon as that happens, we see the red light from Luke's X-Wing shining on Yoda. And historically, red lights kind of mean danger or, bad things are happening, essentially. What do you think that just that moment in that line means there is another? Like, do you think that they, without knowing, they alluded to Leia being Luke's sister and Leia being the other? Or do you think that maybe deep down there was someone else that we don't ever meet? We do meet down the line. What's your whole interpretation of that moment with Yoda?
Well, this comes right after Obi-Wan says he's our last hope or something like that, right?
Yeah,
and then
he says he's our last hope, and then Yoda says, "No, now matters are worse. There's another."
There's another, yeah. So, yeah, looking back on it, knowing what we know and how things wrap up, you think like, oh, there's another Skywalker. There's another. He has a
Jedi.
sister, right? That's what that's leading to. But if you just look at it as there's another hope, it gets so much more broad.
Especially looking at the rest of the saga, like in hindsight.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it could obviously be Leia, but it could also be, it could also be Vader, because he ends up having a really large role to play at the very end.
That's true. Like that turn at the end, that could be like,
And there's so many different things that come together to end the Empire at the end of Return of the Jedi. So you could be mentioning something about that, or it could be something. I think, though, that I would have to go with, I think they're inferring Leia. Because, well, especially at that time, I don't know if they had thought about other characters that, maybe we know about, but they didn't know about at the time that they could be inferring to. And the other thing is, this is the Skywalker saga. And they are the main characters. We follow their story throughout this whole thing. And so that's what makes me feel like this is going to be pointing to another Skywalker that at that time we don't know about.
Yeah, I like that. Jackson, I know we've talked about this before, but what about you?
I'm in the same boat. I think it's a line that is directed to make us aware about Leia, that there is another Skywalker. There's another chance at this, because I think it's that, and to them, Skywalker is the only hope, and whatever the changes those tides. Anakin's the one that, while it mainly benefited the dark side, it balanced the Force to two powerful Sith, to two powerful Jedi, whereas Luke is kind of the savior of the Jedi, and they're, Obi-Wan's like, we don't have anything else, like what else are we gonna do? And Yoda's like, well, no, it's like, we may think that the girl is probably just a really good strategist and a military expert and whatnot, and is a general by her early 20s and whatnot, but it's like, she also has the potential to be a really good Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think in that moment, Yoda kind of sees Luke failing him and is almost just seeing, well, crap, we lost another Skywalker, Obi-Wan. Sorry, I did what I could, but he's too reckless. I mean, he even said it. He's way too reckless to become a Jedi. That's kind of true. I mean,
that's a Skywalker trait.
Yeah, and it almost feels like he's completely disregarding his training of, honoring what your friends are fighting for, and their destiny will come to them, but it is important that you are completing your training and that you are doing the right thing because the galaxy is counting on you. Everyone is counting on you to save the galaxy from the Empire. But Luke is so invested in wanting to help his friends and save Han and Leia because he sees that vision of the city in the clouds and Han and Leia in pain and dying.
Yeah.
I think, one, that says a lot about Luke's character and his compassion for his friends and just his compassion in general. And it also says a lot about Luke's character because even though this all-powerful Jedi is telling him all these things, he still has his own way of thinking, and he still is confident in making his own choices, whether others around him think that they are not smart choices.
His attachments push him to lead more into what he feels is right and what is actually, I agree with Luke in the sense of what is right, of going to save your friends, whereas Yoda and Obi-Wan are kind of like, look at the big picture, there's so much more at stake, and Luke is like, I don't care. I don't care.
And I think at this point, Obi-Wan and Yoda are still kind of in the classic Jedi mindset of, it doesn't matter. You must, like you just said, you must focus on the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. And, attachments were kind of the downfall of the Jedi. We saw that with Anakin and several Jedi. And I just think that Yoda and Obi-Wan's biggest fear are seeing Luke risk the entire well-being of the galaxy just because he wants to save a couple people. And I think that's where that big conflict comes in within Luke, and we see this throughout the rest of the saga. Even is Luke's whole inner conflict and him questioning just like the role he plays in the galaxy, because so many people have counted on him in his life, and he's also let so many people down in his life at the same time. So it's just a weird conflict that we see throughout the saga.
And I also think too is that Yoda and Obi-Wan didn't fully accept the realization that in order for the Jedi to survive, they themselves as an order needed to adapt. We talked about adapting, and I can't remember if it was that in our first Imperial Cantina episode, but talk about how the Jedi adapted in order to accomplish the goals that they want. And that's where Yoda and Obi-Wan struggled, was that they didn't accept the adaptation that needed to be made. They themselves adapted to what needed to be done for the bigger picture of, bringing Luke up as the Jedi to save the whole order. But they didn't realize that now Luke was going to be this Jedi of adaptation. He was going to be this something that wasn't what they were around for. And it was something different. And they never prepared Luke for that. And that's what makes Luke's overall kind of saga journey a little heartbreaking, is because he's put on this pedestal all his life,
Yeah. And I bring up this line, so really quick, I bring up this line all the time, but it is so important to me. is in The Last Jedi when Luke is just sitting there and he's saying, what do you expect? Do you expect me to pull out my laser sword and take on the entire First Order by myself? That is literally, I've said this before, but I keep saying it. That's the encapsulation of Luke's journey right there. Like, what do you want me to do? What do you expect from me? I mean, come on. Anyway, Jack.
Everyone expects
Addison,
something.
Yeah.
Everything expects something from Luke. I just want to piggyback off of what you guys said. I think you brought up some really important points about Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda still being caught in the old Jedi ways. You said that, a Jedi with attachments was the downfall of many a Jedi and the Jedi Order. But I don't think it was attachments. I think it was how the Jedi Order viewed attachments was the downfall of the Jedi Order. The Jedi Order itself was the downfall of the Jedi Order. And they're still... They're still in that where they're like, you got to look at the bigger picture. You got to save the galaxy. That's the important thing here. But they forgot that if you want someone to save the galaxy, that and Luke just wants to go and save his friends and the people he cares about. Isn't that the kind of person that you want to save the galaxy? Why are you trying to get that out of him? That's a person who cares and would drop anything to help the people he cares about. And if you build these people to have no connections or care for the galaxy or the people that they're supposed to be protecting, that's going to be a problem down the road because they're going to make a decision that's not based on that love and that connection to the galaxy they're supposed to be serving. And that adaptation is so important, and it is so important for Luke to discover that and for him to start to realize that there's something wrong with the way Jedi do things, even though he hasn't learned much about it.
Yeah, and I think that, from Yoda's point of view, I think it's just not letting that attachment cloud your judgment and not letting that attachment affect your decisions, which I think Luke is doing in this point. Is he's leaving his training to become a Jedi Knight just to save his friends. And I think that says a lot about Luke, and I think what Yoda thinks about that says a lot about Yoda. So there's a lot of, even just like in a line of dialogue, it tells you so much about these characters. And that's so great about the writing of this movie too.
It's totally the push Luke needs too, is that even though he made a selfish and I guess an act and decision that went against everything he's kind of been recently taught and followed more his gut and his morals about it. He still learned, especially losing a hand. He understands kind of the big picture that they were talking about. And that's how Luke is now able to adapt to when he goes full Jedi Knight in Return of the Jedi is from the events of Bespin, and the conversation he has right before leaving for Bespin is once I think, the encounter with Vader happens, it clicks. It clicks for Luke, and that whole chunk just kind of like makes everything that Luke needed to understand have been understood.
Yeah, that's Luke's journey right there.
Yeah. I think that he, in that moment, he's realizing that, like you were saying, Luke was a pawn in some ways, and he was part of a master plan to save the galaxy. And he's realizing there's more to it than that. And he does realize how his attachments can cost him. And you were saying, Braydon, you brought up the difference between what Yoda thinks about attachments and what like Luke thought about attachments, and how we get that in dialogues, and that the Jedi Order realized that having attachments can affect your judgment. And so their solution was then no one should have attachments. Yeah. But the problem is then no one is able to deal with attachments or how to make a good decision when you're attached to something, if that were to come up. And then that comes up and they have no like emotional range to like deal with that and move forward when like emotionally conflicted. So it's like, I get your point, but we got to find another solution to go about moving forward with that. And that's kind of where Luke kind of realizes there's a struggle there.
Yeah. And kind of closing up with this conversation, Luke is basically, by The Last Jedi, he's like, dude, there's gotta be a better way of going about this. Like, there's gotta be a better way. And I think, we eventually end up finding that. But it kind of, so we don't have a 4-hour long episode. I think we need to move along. But
Empire Strikes Back Part 2.
Yeah, well, no, Part 2. But this is probably, this movie has probably the most quoted line in cinema, and that is, "No, I am your father." What are some of your favorite just quotes and lines from this movie that really stand out to you and speak to you?
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about some of them. When Han says, he's talking about Lando, he's like, he's a gambler, smuggler, he's a scoundrel. You'd like him, like, yeah, so great. Because he had just talked to Leia about that earlier, and it's hilarious. Like we said, all of Yoda's lines on Dagobah, like, just great life advice. Get those as motivational posters, put up somewhere. This classics that stick with: do or do not, there is no try. There is another huge. Do you have something we're gonna?
I won't fail you. Or what do you say? I won't fail you. I'm not afraid. And you like pans in. You will be.
Yeah,
you will be,
and that comes back that comes back later in the saga, which is another thing I love about the sequels. Is Luke ends up being very afraid, of what he's done.
I love the line Vader gives, where he's like, "You have learned much, but you're not a Jedi yet." Yeah. It's just
that
kind of echoing. Yeah,
that starting sequence of that fight is incredible. It's just him. They're both standing there, and it's the slow start of igniting each lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This one's kind of funny, but in the Hoth base, when Leia is kind of giving those like rebellion soldiers direction. Like this, I don't know who picked out this guy to say this line, or why they even picked out this guy to say this line, but the delivery literally goes as follows: 2 fighters against a Star Destroyer.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And how did Irvin Kershner or whatever unit director directed that scene, how did they not go, "Wow, that guy sucked"?
They were way behind schedule, and they just had to get it in.
They just had to get it through.
Because, I mean, there are so many ways to at least deliver that line to where it's not absolutely awful. But that is the worst delivery of a line I've ever heard. It's, "Wow, 2 fighters against a Star Destroyer."
One I say in my head a lot, that I don't know why I think it's just the way it's the way the original voice actor, this is for Boba Fett, this is a Boba Fett line, is before Tamara Morrison did the relines for the original. It's the way he says, "He's no good to me dead," when he's got that kind of like
gravelly voice,
like Cockney accent with him. I love it. I love the way it sounds. It's just, "He's no good to me dead."
Yeah, and I love also on the Hoth base, the moment with Dak in the snow speeder.
Poor Dak.
Poor Dak, man. But he has this line
F's in the chat for Dak.
Yeah, F's in the chat, everybody. But he has this great moment when they're about to go out, and he's like, "Man, I feel like I could take on the entire Empire myself."
Yeah. Well, obviously you couldn't.
Know, buddy.
And we learn in Lost Stars that Dak is kind of like this new member of the rebellion, and that like this is kind of his first big mission, and he's so excited to go out.
And
he's like, "I'm here with Luke. We're good."
Yeah, he's like, "Oh, I get to fly with Luke Skywalker. This is so cool." And then he just gets pancaked. He just gets straight up flattened
by some. Yeah. Oh man.
Oh man, poor Dak. He had so much potential.
We're gonna pour one out for Dak.
I think a classic from the movie as well that is quoted a lot, but I don't think is appreciated is a lot. Is "I have altered the deal. Pray I do not alter it any further."
This deal's getting worse all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and also we got, "Never tell me the odds." That's where this came from.
Scruffy looking.
who's scruffy looking? And the scruffy looking Nerf herder line.
Yeah,
we got
right.
that.
Yeah,
Like, so many iconic Star Wars lines.
Oh, man.
Oh, it's so good.
Man,
Oh,
we
yeah.
could sit here. We can make it an entire 2-hour long podcast just saying all
Just
the
quoting
lines.
it. Yeah.
You know, let me share probably this last one, then we can kind of move on with our next topics. But it's not even a quote. It's a scene that, you know, the whole movie, Vader's been just dropping people left and right. People cannot do his tasks. They cannot get what he wants done. He just wants to capture this ship and capture these rebels, and no one can do it. And he just chokes on anybody. And it's the very end of the movie, and it's after Vader's revealed that he is the father of, you know, Luke Skywalker, and he's, you know, communicating with Luke on the Falcon as they pass, you know, his ship and whatnot. And he thinks the whole time that their hyperdrive is out, and he's like, "Oh, we're gonna get him. It's gonna be, you know, the Empire's got him in the trap." And then last second, R2 fixes it, and they zoom off, and everyone just kind of freezes and stares at Vader.
Yes.
Vader just turns and just walks out of the bridge. And it is probably one of the scariest moments because he just leaves. He just walks out, and it's that silence that is so, like, just so chilling, just so to the bone scary.
There's also
I loved watching
there's also the
one
apology accepted, Captain Yoda.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That last scene you were just talking about, Jackson, I love the one officer who just looks down and does his work, and as soon as Vader passes, he takes a look at Vader and he's like, "Okay, I think we're good," and then gets back to, they all look around and they're like, "Oh my god, I thought we were all gonna die. Oh my god."
It reminds me of that one SNL sketch. Man, Matt straight up sucks.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, exactly.
Kylo Ren radar technician, the Matt the radar technician. Yeah.
Another line from Vader that got me thinking was after the duel on Bespin when he's like, you know, "Prepare my Star Destroyer for my arrival." And in my head, I'm just thinking someone up there is drawing a bubble bath for James Earl Jones as soon as he gets back to the Star. What preparations are being made on the Star Destroyer for him to return?
Get Vader's back to bath ready, and be sure to add the strawberry scented bubbles he likes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some Twi'leks ready to give him a massage.
Yeah.
And then there's also a great Yoda line. Again, we've talked about so many times about how all of his lines are such life lessons, but he says, "Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter."
Yeah.
And that basically means we're more than just bodies walking around. We are living luminous beings, literally luminous beings.
That really reminded me of, I think, have you guys heard, oh man, I'm blanking on his name now, but the famous scientist,
Bill Nye.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yes.
And him talking about how we're all star stuff. That's him, right? Who's talking about how what we're made
stardust.
of is just stardust. And so I was thinking exactly we're stardust. We're luminous beings. That's what we are. It's all connected. I can feel it now. Yeah. That was such a cool moment to think that no matter what you're doing or what you're going through in life, you are a luminous being just by being you.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we move on, just one more. I know Mark Hamill has told this story so many times, but for the whole "Luke, I am your father," that's the most misquoted line in cinema, by the way. It's not "Luke, I'm your father." It's "No, I'm your father." But Luke, Mark Hamill has told the story so many times about how nobody knew about the twist besides him, George Lucas, and Irvin Kershner. And what happened was when they were filming that scene on set, David Prowse was instructed to say, Obi-Wan never told you the truth. Obi-Wan killed your father. And then that's where the hand gets cut off. Luke screams, falls down the shaft. Right before the scene, they shot the scene. Irvin Kershner and Lucas come up to him and say, "That's actually not what can be said here. It's going to be, no, I am your father." And I know it. Irvin Kershner knows it. And now we're telling you. And if it leaks, we know it was you. So for that whole year, Mark Hamill was so scared that he was going to leak that Darth Vader was the father.
The shocked Pikachu meme. They just walked away to Mark Hamill just
Yeah, but it literally
deal with that as you will.
Literally any Mark Hamill interview, you will see him talk about that. But it's just it's just a fun little behind the scenes.
It's a great story.
Moment of the line. But kind of moving on here. We'll wrap up here in a second. But what are some of your favorite characters and performances throughout this movie? Just any new characters that pop up, some background characters, maybe just your favorite characters in this movie besides our main three with Han, Luke, and Leia.
Yeah. I mean, Lando, obviously, such a great introduction. So cool to see him. Oh, yeah. That whole first opening where like comes in all angry and then he's like so happy to see him.
Around here again.
Yeah. I know, like it's so good, and it just gives us an immediate look into who Lando is. And I love when he has that line about he's like Han's like, "Oh, what are you responsible now?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's what you get for being successful. You got to be responsible."
And I think that is so true. That is such a great the way you look at Solo now. And you look at this movie.
I gotta rewatch it.
It is so you realize how good of a job Solo actually does at developing these characters and allowing us to see where these characters were and how they get to where we meet them in Empire. But, yeah.
I love Boba Fett. I love
him. Yeah, you do.
Big Boba Fett fan. Just how casual and calm. He's barely even in the movie of doing stuff besides
but he makes such a big moment. Yeah. It's
the shot specifically when Luke arrives at Bespin and he's sneaking through the halls and he passes the stormtroopers carrying Han away, and they're all walking,
interesting.
They're all walking nonchalantly, and the only person who reacts is Boba Fett, and he turns at the last second and shoots at Luke. Oh, so cool. So cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And of course we're introduced to Yoda in this movie, and I think that all of my favorite sequences of this movie have Yoda in them. Yeah. That's saying if I don't have a non-favorite sequence of this entire movie.
Right. Oh, everything's so good. Yeah. One of my favorite side characters are all of the snakes on Dagobah, the real live snakes. Good job there.
I like the iguanas on the swamp planet.
Right. Just literal iguanas.
And then we got, of course, the Ugnaughts on Bespin. We got Lobot, who doesn't say a word, but is one of the most iconic. And then, of course, we have Wilro Hood with the ice cream maker running in the background.
Oh, my God.
One of the most cosplayed characters in Star Wars Celebration.
I love the little Ugnaughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just said that.
I was just talking about
get with the program,
it's
Jackson.
The squealing that they have with it.
Yeah.
They're just playing keep away from Chewbacca.
I love to talk about Bespin real quick. I love how the thing that happens with 3PO when he gets tossed into he finds the stormtroopers actually, and they disassemble him and whatnot. I think it's funny that when that's initially first shown, it just kind of looks like 3PO stumbled into a room and they were like, "Hey, you're a rogue droid, you need come with us," and they disassemble him, and then Chewbacca gets him back. But that's their leading force of everyone not trusting Lando. At least Leia is look, C-3PO was in an accident, we can't trust this person. And Han's I can't trust him either, but he's my friend.
Yeah. Well, it leads to another great Han line where Lando's something happened to your droid, and Han's no, why?
Not at all. Yeah, no, why?
He's there's no problem. No problem.
Maxie, my favorite, talking about action and reaction, when Lando's, he goes, "You look absolutely beautiful" to Leia, and Han covers his face, just slowly just puts his hand over his mouth.
He's like, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah. And it's so great how we know there's a backstory there, but we don't know what it is. It's such a great nuance with Billy D and Harrison.
So good. Turned into a great character.
I think Star Wars wouldn't be Star Wars without John Williams and the great themes that come from John Williams and how iconic everything that he touches is. Of course, this is the first movie we get the Imperial March and so many great themes. What are some of your favorite Star Wars themes from this movie?
This one's got a lot too.
Yeah.
Man, the music just works so well and just becomes such a part of Star Wars that there's a lot of moments that you can't differentiate them, and you're just like, oh, I'm living in this moment, and then you realize like everything just came together so well. We got like the music, we got the cinematography, the acting, like everything going on. You talked earlier about Yoda raising the X-Wing out of the swamp, like huge moment there. The Imperial March coming in for the first time. Yeah, I mean, what are you guys thinking? I mean, I love the music. John Williams is so good on this.
Go for it, Jackson.
I think Yoda's theme is probably that and Imperial March are definitely like the two big one. It's like you said, Yoda lifting out the X-Wing, and it's that final, ba-ba, ba-ba, that song. I also like the Rebels at Bay and the Asteroid Chase songs. I love the chase music that is used for, especially like the Falcon team and being chased by the that it's the bass and the do 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 do. I love that intense action that
like
comes
in
with
pursuit.
it.
Yeah. And this is also our first introduction, I believe. I could be mistaken, but it's our first introduction to Leia's theme. Na, 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 na. But yeah, and you guys talk about that Yoda lifting the X-Wing moment. That is just Star Wars bliss right there.
Right.
Listening to that John Williams score, seeing that beautiful shot of the X-Wing coming up, and Luke looking at it in awe, like I can't believe my eyes. How is this happening? It's just such a great musical moment. And I just think this entire saga is riddled with genius John Williams everywhere. I don't think I would be as emotionally attached to Star Wars if it didn't have the John Williams score.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah, music is just what connects you to something emotionally, and that's what has to be there.
Yeah.
And
the fact that the music is just as good as the movie, like, just solidifies it so much better.
Just listening to it on its own. Yeah. And
absolutely.
It brings you right. You can see what's happening because they've become so entwined together.
Yeah. It's just so great. Kind of wrapping up here, a couple more things I wanted to bring up is, this movie, we see Han, Luke, and Leia together for a good portion of the movie in A New Hope. In Empire Strikes Back, they're separated most of the movie. We don't see them together except for the beginning and the very end. But Luke never even gets to interact with Han until after all the Hoth stuff. So why do you think it was so effective to have Luke off doing something else while Han and Leia had their own adventure? Why do you think that worked so well?
I'm glad you brought this up because this is something I was thinking about too while watching this. It is so important that they did this. We have this classic splitting the party move, and I think that was able to open up so many avenues for character development because when you have all of the characters together, they don't all have the same screen time. They don't all have the same amount of lines, and like one person is kind of leading the scene or whatnot. And when we see them all together, they're all off doing one thing, and that was great to see. But splitting them up, you get to see so much like individual things. You see like how Luke is on his own and like him just exploring. I loved seeing a lot more of Han and the tips and the tricks that he's picked up being a smuggler on the run from the Empire for however many years. He's got all of this stuff. You see him and Leia, they have moments alone together, which they didn't have before. And you get to see them in different situations, and you test the connection of the characters by making them far apart.
Yeah.
And Luke feeling them in danger and having to come again, like builds that strength. I think it was such a brilliant thing, and it also opens up the world more.
I agree.
It gives the Empire more things to do and creates tension there. It gives us glimpses into other characters around the world, and there's just more stuff you can explore when you've like split that up. And I think it was very important to the movie.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point, how it allows the characters to instead of using all of their screen time together to feed off each other and characterize themselves that way, we get a separation where Luke is off and we see how he's interacting with just what is thrown at him without Han and Leia at his side. And then we also get an opportunity to see Han and Leia's relationship develop and seeing that spark between them. And it kind of allows us to really connect with and love Han and Leia and also Luke. And I just think it's so brilliant the way they're so far apart, yet we don't really process the fact that, oh wait, like Luke can't just come to their rescue right now. He's doing important Jedi stuff.
Can't come to the phone right now doing Jedi shit.
Jackson, what do you think?
You guys have kind of said all the main points about it. I think keeping separated and keeping one half in constant turmoil really adds the intensity and like the danger that is really at afoot. You know, it's while Luke is off doing his Jedi stuff, it's like his friends are being hunted and being chased, and it's, you know, the other part of the group is just constantly fighting on their feet for it while Luke's off lifting rocks and listening to hippie music with Yoda. I definitely agree that like keeping that grounded kind of reality of like, oh, like not everybody can do their fullest part because they're not all together here. And it just feels like everybody's like, it's like we're just in the final stance and we're just taking swings out at nothing, trying to at least make a hit. And the fact that you can't do that as your full group makes it just that much scarier and intense.
Yeah. And it makes you realize how high the stakes are for this movie are, like in general.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, they've always had each other from up to this point, from meeting each other up until where we are in the beginning of this movie. They've always had each other to get through all of these different issues. And they're thrown into situations where they have to kind of figure things out on their own. And like they have to go about things in such a different way that they've never had to do before. So I think that's really cool. Just kind of wrapping up here.
You mind if I jump in with one more thought on what we were just talking about?
Yeah, go for it. Anytime.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking like what Jackson was saying about splitting them up and having one side in constant like turmoil and conflict. If the whole movie was just Luke on Dagobah, it'd get a little boring. And so, you know, the fact that we have this turmoil on one side, we jump to Luke and we're like excited in this, but also like what's going on with Han and Leia, bringing us back over there. And I think it was also good to take, like, you get to see Leia away from the rebellion for a bit. You get to see all of them away from the rebellion. So Leia and Han are not working towards something. They're reacting and trying to survive. And Luke is working towards something, but he's not together with the rebels, like trying to take down the Death Star or having a plan and working towards it. We get to see Leia as an individual person and a character because she's not the commander, the like person telling everyone what to do. She's out of her element, and so that strips her down a bit to what we get to see, and it's just really cool.
Yeah, that's opening her heart and understanding feelings for like the first time.
That's such a great point you make, though, about characters. That's the perfect way to put it, is characters being out of their element and how they deal with those situations.
Yeah,
and
you learn a lot about them.
Yeah, and it's something that I didn't really think about, was this is actually like the rebellion is on their own in this movie. Like this is more of a character piece.
Yeah, exactly. The rebellion is there at the beginning, but the rest of it, they link up at the end, but it's, you know, nothing in the middle. The rebellion doesn't come to help them. Like they have to take care of all this on their own.
Yeah, I think that's just so great. Kind of the last closing-ish thoughts for this movie. We are introduced to 3 new planets that are so cool. You know, and I've talked about before on this show how a lot of the planets are just basically ecosystems put into a planet. So we'll have like the snow planet, the desert planet, the forest planet, and we've also got like the the swamp planet. Like they're all different biomes kind of put into a planet. What do you think this movie, how do you think this movie could have changed had we still been on the planets and locations we've already seen? Like, why was it so important to bring in, 3 new planets that we never even heard of before?
That's a good question. I mean, I think just right off the bat, it's very important for like world building, that you get to see how big the galaxy is, how diverse planets are, because we really get what do we get? Tatooine, desert planet, and then we're like in space, and we get the Death Star. And those are kind of the main ones in the first one.
That's about all we get.
Yavin 4, right? Yeah, Alderaan, which is sort of like a forest planet. Alderaan, yeah. I mean, just a flyby, really. We don't really stop off there for too long. But it's so important. I mean, just to build that, and then also just to you learn more, like about characters based on where you find them. So like the rebellion, having to get to this icy planet devoid of life, or devoid-ish of life, and making a way there. You learn a lot about Yoda based on where he decided to live. Bespin, this like city in the clouds, Lando's like, you look good up here among us in the clouds, you should stay here, to Leia. And it's just like these characters against their settings, it tells a lot about who they are too. And that's a sort of like that visual storytelling, that they don't have to come out and literally say, this is the character I am. You see it based on where they are.
That hit the nail right on the head. That's exactly what I was going to say.
It keeps it fresh too. It just keeps the story itself just it's fresh in general.
New scenery, new imagery, but it's cool seeing how each planet, absolutely piggyback, just how it caters to each character. I think at this point, like with the planets that we've seen, it's kind of funny how they're all barren wastelands with very few civilizations, except I would say, obviously the Death Star and Alderaan, and I say Bespin because I was going to say Bespin because like Bespin's really just like Cloud City, but like like that's it. Yeah, the rest is cloud. So
we've talked a lot about the different themes and lessons that can be learned in this movie. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you kind of picked up watching this movie that is kind of an important theme or lesson that you've noticed?
I think one thing is that wisdom comes from a lot of different sources, and you can learn from a lot of different things in life. And so we talked a lot about Yoda and all like the life lessons we could get from him. But for all Yoda's wisdom, he did make some mistakes, or he was part of the Jedi falling because of the mistakes that the Jedi made. And Luke has to come to the conclusion, and us as the viewer, that they had some good points, and like saving the galaxy is important, and following his instructions are important too. But that having your friends and learning from them is very important as well. And you can't just go to like a guru and like listen to all the wise sayings and then go and live your life. Like there's a lot of experiencing it for yourself, and there's a lot of having friends and fellowship around you and surrounding you with people that you love and care about, and that can encourage and build you up to be a better version of yourself.
I love that. Yeah. Jackson, was there anything else you picked up that we haven't talked about?
For me, the big theme that stands out, it's mainly kind of Luke's theme, and it's almost, I say resolved, but it's pointed out midway through when Luke goes through the cave on Dagobah, and he's like, what am I gonna find? And Yoda's like, only what you fear. And it turns out that while he thinks what he fears is Vader, it's he fights the Dream Vader and he cuts his head off and the helmet explodes, revealing Luke, kind of solidifying the thing he feared was himself. He was afraid of what he was going to become, of the conversation right before of the good and the bad is, how will I know the difference? And Yoda's just like, you'll know by your intuition and who you are as a person. You will understand what is good and bad. And that only drives the Force more, that the thing Luke fears is himself, and that cave solidifies it. So then he tries to prove his point of, I'm not afraid of anything by going off and fighting Vader, and it giving him those consequences and repercussions of that choice. It removes the matter of fear that Luke had, is that he no longer fears himself. He no longer fears really anything else besides maybe the dark side. That's the only thing that he is so afraid of, is that that it'll consume him like it did his father. And that's more kind of the Return of the Jedi kind of conflict. But like, even then, like right here, this is when it's introduced, is that Luke fears himself being lost to the dark so much more than anything else.
And I think that fear is even heightened, especially when he learns how easy it is to get trapped up in the dark side. And
absolutely.
The dark side being the quicker, easier path. And also, I think, to your point, fearing the thing he fears the most is himself. This movie also has a lot to do with finding yourself and, trying to distinguish what your journey actually is and what it all means. Because, when he realizes that he is, in fact, the son of Darth Vader, that's some scary stuff. Like, being the son of such a dark and, such a
powerful force for evil in the galaxy.
Yeah, and the whole galaxy is so intimidated by him and intimidated by Vader. And being the bloodline of that has just got to be like, no one's going to look at me the same now. I'm just the son of Vader.
And he's just so heartbroken. Just, Ben, why didn't you tell me?
Nobody was telling him that. Like, he realizes all of the different choices he could have made had he known that he is the son of Darth Vader.
The weight just crushes him. While he's sitting in the Falcon, he's just like, oh no.
Yeah.
But I think he chooses in that moment that, again, this has to do with a lot of the Star Wars themes of choosing your own journey and choosing your own destiny. And Jackson, you talk a lot about that with the sequels and stuff too. Is this definitely has a lot to do with Luke kind of collecting himself and being like, okay, I know this is my bloodline now, but there is something I can do about it, and I'm not just stuck sitting here and soaking in this devastation of, oh my God, my dad is the most evil man on Earth, or on Earth. I say that as if we're on Earth, is the most evil man in the galaxy. I think at the end there, he kind of takes a moment. He takes a moment to sulk and, wow, this kind of sucks. But then we get this hopeful looking into the galaxy, looking into the stars, and being like, okay, I can make a change here. I can make a difference here, and we'll see where this goes. And I think that's just a beautiful encapsulation of just the saga itself, of, destinies and choosing your own destiny and fighting yourself.
Yeah.
And
you can't live someone else's journey.
Absolutely.
So someone else can try to lead you along a journey, but you have to choose for yourself. And there's more than one way to take care of an enemy. I mean, the best way to defeat your enemy is to, I'm going to quote Sensei Wu from the Lego Ninjago TV show.
Wow.
And he says, the best way to defeat your enemy is to make him your friend. And I think that Luke is starting to realize that, well, Vader is more complicated. My life is more complicated. It's not as simple as what Yoda and Ben were setting it out to be. Like, I just got to train and then I can save the galaxy.
Not just some farm boy anymore.
Exactly. And what am I going to do about that now? How am I going to go about this? I still need to complete my training, but that doesn't mean I'm going to follow exactly what they want for me.
He's like, I got a lot of questions for Master Yoda when I get back.
Yeah, exactly. You be ready.
Kicks open the door.
Yoda's like,
Neil. Well, Addison, I can't thank you enough for coming on and talking about The Empire Strikes Back.
It was great talking to you guys. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
always have a blast talking to you about Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
Where can they find you on your social medias? I know you're not too active, but where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at the Addison Brown, and that's pretty much it for now. and there may be more stuff in the future, but check me out there.
Cool. Jackson, where can they find you?
Just the usuals. You can find me on Twitter at QuacksandScalene. That's QUACKSON and scaling like the triangle. And then you can follow my photography Instagram, because I don't use my normal Instagram that much, which is at Daleen_photography, and Daleen spelled DALEEN. Braydon, what about you?
You can find me on Twitter at Braydathlon and on Instagram at braydonleadbetter. And don't forget to look up the show on all of our social medias. We are at Through Imperial Eyes Pod on Instagram. On Twitter, we are at Imperial Eyes Pod. And for YouTube, you can just search up Through Imperial Eyes Podcast. We will come up. And also, please leave that rating, leave that review on Apple Podcasts. It really, really helps out the show. And if you don't have Apple Podcasts, just follow us on Spotify. Listen to our episodes, ask some questions. We do take questions weekly for our main show. We talk about all the Star Wars news, and by the end of the show, we take all our listener questions. So if you do have something you want us to talk about, hit up all of our social medias. But until then, next week we will be talking Return of the Jedi. I know that's Jackson's favorite movie, so he's excited to talk about that. But
I'm very excited.
If Addison and Jackson don't have anything else,
I got nothing.
I'm all set. Thank you guys for bringing me on.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Addison. We'll definitely have you back in the future, but make sure to tune in next week for another news episode, and we'll talk about Return of the Jedi. But until then, may the Force be with you.